"Please, don't take the linen off," she whispered. The drifter did, and froze in horror. He hadn't touched a woman in 13 years, not since Tennessee, not since the farmhouse burned and the girl he couldn't save burned with it. That memory lived in his bones like shrapnel, and he carried it the way a man carries old wounds, quiet, heavy, and alone. Samuel Mercer had built his life on silence. Up in the New Mexico hills, the air turned dry and thin, and the only sound was wind dragging itself across stone. His cabin stood there, built with his own hands, 4 walls against time and regret. A shotgun leaned in the corner with a scar in its stock, same as the scars in him. He'd cut timber, hauled stone, eaten beans cold straight from the can. Years passed in that rhythm. A man could vanish out there if he wanted, and Samuel wanted nothing more than to vanish. The land suited his solitude. Days bled into one another, the grind of the axe, the scrape of steel on whetstone, the hiss of coffee, long past its prime. Nights stretched longer, haunted by the crack of rifles in his dreams and the ghost voices of men who'd died, calling his name. He carried them quietly. They spoke enough for him, until the day silence broke. At first he thought it was the wind carrying a trick of sound, a faint rustle, uneven, pulling closer. Then came the rhythm of bare feet slapping hard-packed earth. He turned, hand already finding the grip of the shotgun. From the edge of the pines she emerged, stumbling, staggering, as though the desert itself had tried to erase her, barefoot, bleeding, wrapped in a torn scrap of linen so tattered it clung to her body like smoke. She looked less like a woman than some desperate spirit clawing its way back from hell. Her arms were cross-hatched with scratches, lips cracked and split, hair matted with dust and sweat. But it was her eyes that struck him, hollow, wide, staring behind her at something Samuel could not see, as if the ghosts were still chasing. She collapsed at his boots without a scream. The shotgun slipped from his grip as her body crumpled against the dirt. 2 words crawled from her throat, faint as ash. "Please, don't." Samuel froze, heart hammering against his ribs. She wasn't bleeding much on the outside, but the tremors shaking her frame spoke of a war waged beneath the skin. When he bent down, the cloth slipped from her shoulder, and what he saw turned his gut to stone. Her back was carved into torment, burns, welts, ragged scars layered over one another, some fresh, others old. Letters and symbols etched deep, twisted into patterns no human should wear. Branding, a claim of ownership seared into flesh. For a heartbeat he didn't see her. He saw Tennessee again, the fire, the farmhouse collapsing, the girl he couldn't save staring through smoke with the same hollow eyes. The guilt he'd buried, clawed free, ripping at his chest. He had walked away once. He had sworn never again. Slowly Samuel shrugged off his weather-stained coat. He wrapped it around her shoulders, steady as a father tucking in a child. She flinched but did not pull away. He didn't ask questions. Questions were knives when a soul was this raw. He simply lifted her into his arms, carried her toward the cabin, and for the first time in years felt something stir inside that wasn't regret. The cabin wasn't holy ground. Just 4 walls, a cot, the smell of cedar smoke baked into the timbers. But he laid her down as though it were sacred. The summer night bit cold, so he lit the stove not for the chill, but because firelight gave a place rhythm, a heartbeat. She curled into his coat, clutching it like armor, as though cloth alone might shield her from a world eager to devour her. Samuel busied himself with ritual. He ground stale coffee until the sound filled the silence. He stoked the fire, sat at the table, the glow painting her face in broken light. Every snap of the logs made her flinch. Even the wind rattling the shutters sent shivers through her body. Hours stretched. The fire burned low. Samuel watched, listening for breath, for proof she hadn't already slipped away. Then she stirred. Her eyes found his. No plea, no thanks, just a faint flicker of life under ash. He didn't speak. He only gave a small nod, the kind soldiers once gave one another in trenches, saying without words, "You're still alive? So am I." Her gaze drifted away, back to the wall. The silence folded over them again. Morning came slow, bleeding copper across the hills. She moved her lips, voice cracking like paper. "Water." Samuel fetched a tin cup, careful as if handling glass. His movements were slow, deliberate, as though she were a wild thing ready to bolt. She drank, cautious, then lowered the cup with trembling hands. Her eyes lingered on him longer this time, not pleading, not grateful, just steady, as if to say, "I'm still here." Her name would come later. For now she was only a riddle, half hidden, stitched with torment and survival. Samuel didn't press. Silence was sometimes a sharper kindness than words, but silence never lasts forever. By afternoon, the woman stepped outside. She wore his coat, cinched around her frame, the sleeves too long, dragging at her wristbone. Her steps were unsteady, but she walked with a quiet claim, as though the ground beneath her would no longer be owned by another. She lowered herself onto the porch steps beside Samuel. For a long time she said nothing. The sun glared off the grasslands, heat shimmering in waves. Samuel whittled at a chair leg, his knife shaving thin curls of wood. Then, soft as though speaking only to herself, she said, "They made me clean their boots." The knife kept moving. Samuel didn't flinch, didn't look at her, just nodded, giving her space. She went on, words spilling like water from a cracked jug. She told of a mining camp hidden beyond the ridge, not on any map, a kingdom without laws, men who worked people until their bones gave out, punished escape with cruelty so fierce it left scars that spoke long after. She said she'd tried to flee twice. The first time they broke her nose. The second, they carved her back with fire. She didn't say how she escaped the third time. Some truths were too jagged for daylight. The sun dipped lower. The air cooled. Then came a sound Samuel hadn't heard in months. Hoofbeats climbing the ridge road. He stiffened. His hand slid toward the shotgun leaning against the porch. He motioned her inside. She froze, then obeyed. Too quick, too practiced, like a hunted animal that knew the drill. A rider appeared, not a ranch hand, but a man dressed like a banker who'd wandered too far from town. Waistcoat straining, greasy mustache curled tight. His eyes gleamed with cruel authority. He pulled his horse to a stop, spitting into the dust, and called out with a voice sharp as a branding iron, "Clara Mae." One chance to come back quiet. The name struck the air heavy. Clara Mae. Her face drained pale in the doorway. Samuel rose, shotgun easy in his hands. His voice was gravel. "She's not going anywhere," the man smirked. "Ain't up to you, old-timer." The hammer clicked back. Steel spoke louder than words. The man tugged his reins, wheeling his horse, but his gaze lingered. A promise written in cruelty. He rode off slow, dust rising behind him, carrying the echo of return. Samuel stayed on the porch, shotgun resting across his lap. Clara Mae lingered in the doorway, clutching his coat close, pale as moonlight. Inside, the silence grew thick. No longer the silence of solitude, but the silence before a storm. 3 days passed, quiet ones, but not peaceful. The kind of quiet that pressed against the chest, heavy as a storm cloud. Samuel stayed close to the cabin. He sharpened his knives twice a day, checked the sight on his rifle, and cleaned the shotgun until the steel glimmered. Clara Mae noticed. She also noticed the way his eyes never left the ridge, how every gust of wind made him glance up like a man waiting for hoofbeats. She stayed inside at first, wrapped in his coat, sleeping long hours, broken by jolts awake. Her dreams made her thrash, gasps tearing from her throat, but she never screamed. Screams belonged to another life, the life she had just fled. On the fourth morning, Samuel found her on the porch, barefoot still, but steadier. She sat on the steps with a tin cup of water balanced in both hands. The sun was already harsh, bleaching the hills to pale bone. She didn't speak, and neither did he. They watched the world together in silence. At length she asked, "How long you been up here?" He didn't look at her. 13 years. Her eyes flicked toward him, cautious. Hiding? He let the knife in his hand shave another curl from the chair leg. Maybe. She nodded faintly as though she understood. That afternoon she moved through the cabin slow, her fingers brushing against the walls, as if memorizing their shape. She paused at the shelf lined with books whose spines had long since cracked, at the rifle mounted high over the hearth, at the small wooden box tucked beside the stove. She didn't open it. Some things spoke for themselves. That night, while Samuel sat at the table with his coffee, Clara Mae stood by the fire. Her shadow trembled against the wall, thin as smoke. Without turning, she said, "You wonder what they did to me." Samuel didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. She lifted the hem of the coat from her shoulder, showing the twisted scars carved into her back. The firelight caught the letters branded there, shapes burned deep. "They made me property, like cattle, like land." Samuel's jaw tightened. His hand clenched around the tin cup until the metal groaned. She pulled the coat closed again, as though folding the past away. "They'll come," she whispered. "They always come." Samuel set the cup down hard. "Let 'em." The words hung heavy. Not a boast, not a challenge. A simple truth. The storm broke sooner than he expected. On the sixth day, hoofbeats shook the ridge road again. Samuel stepped out, shotgun already at hand. Clara Mae stood behind the doorframe, eyes wide, body rigid. But it wasn't the banker this time. The rider who appeared wore no waistcoat, no smug grin. He carried himself like a man who had spent too long with a rifle in his hands, and too many nights sleeping under open sky. His beard was trimmed neat, his hair streaked with gray, and a silver badge glinted against the dust on his vest. He reined in slow, eyes scanning the cabin, the clearing, the woman in the doorway, and finally settling on Samuel. "Been a long time, Sam." Samuel narrowed his gaze, then lowered the shotgun a fraction. "Too long, Elias." The man dismounted, boots sinking into the dirt with a soldier's weight. He set his rifle against the porch rail, like an old friend taking a seat at the table. His eyes softened as he looked past Samuel to Clara Mae. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat, "name's Sheriff Elias Vance. You're safe now." She didn't answer. She only clutched Samuel's coat tighter. Inside the cabin, whiskey loosened the edges of their reunion. Samuel poured 2 tin cups from a bottle older than Clara Mae herself. Elias downed his with a grunt. "Got your note," he said. "Sounded like a man expecting to die. Figured I'd best come see for myself." Samuel shrugged. "Didn't want to drag you into it." Elias's eyes narrowed. "Old friend, I've been dragged into worse. And if those men ride for who I think they do, this won't stop at your door. This is a mining camp matter, and mining camps don't forgive." Clara Mae shifted in the corner, silent as a shadow. Her eyes followed Elias, distrust flickering in every glance. Samuel noticed. Elias noticed too. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "You'll want to hear this, Sam. There's a man runs that camp out by Devil's Hollow, Silas Harlan, calls himself a businessman. Truth is, he's a tyrant. Buys law when he can, breaks it when he can't. Works folks to death, brands the ones who don't obey." Clara's breath caught sharp in her throat. Samuel's eyes flicked toward her. She didn't speak, but the look was enough. Harlan wasn't just a name to her. Elias continued. "He's got money, guns, and near 100 hired hands. Taking him on ain't justice. It's war." Samuel leaned back in his chair, shadows deepening across his face. His voice was quiet, flat. Then war it is. The days that followed carried the weight of waiting. Elias spread rough maps across the table, drawing lines with the stub of a pencil, his handwriting more soldier than sheriff. Harlan's camp sits here, he said, tapping a scar in the paper. Devil's Hollow, a wound in the earth. Guard towers, supply wagons, ring of cabins for his guns. But greed makes men sloppy. They don't watch their own blind spots. Samuel leaned over, studying. And where's the blind spot? Elias smirked faintly. River cut on the north side, deep channel. He thinks the cliff wall makes it safe. Forgetting rivers carve paths through stone. Clara listened from the hearth, silent but intent. She had begun to move differently, still cautious but no longer shrinking from every sound. Her bruises faded, her eyes clearer. She even braided her hair in the mornings now, a small act of defiance. Each time she did, Samuel felt something shift in his chest. One evening, as Elias sharpened his knife, Clara spoke without tremor. Harlan carved his initials into my back because I spit in his face. The room fell still. Samuel's grip whitened on his shotgun. Elias met her gaze and nodded once, solemn. Then he's marked himself for judgment. The plan began to take shape. Elias would ride out under cover of night, gather men and women with reason to fight. Samuel would hold the cabin, protect Clara Mae, and prepare. But Samuel was not a man built for waiting. Restlessness gnawed at him. On the second day he split wood until his arms trembled, the rhythm of the axe echoing rifle fire in his ears. Clara watched from the porch, a basket of wildflowers resting in her lap. At last she said, "You swing that axe like you're trying to kill the past." He stopped, sweat dripping from his brow, chest heaving. "Maybe I am." Her voice softened. "The past doesn't die that way, but maybe the future does." He looked at her, saw the resolve kindling in her eyes. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was sharpening herself, same as Elias's knife. That night Samuel sat awake by the fire long after Clara slept. Memories gnawed at him. The war, the girl he failed, the long years hiding from anything human. He thought of Clara's scars, her defiance, her survival. He wondered if fate had brought her not to be saved, but to remind him that some battles were worth standing for, no matter the cost. 3 nights later, Elias returned. He wasn't alone. Half a dozen riders followed, each carrying their own scars, their own reasons for vengeance. Farmers with land stolen, ranch hands beaten, one ex-miner with a twisted hand and eyes that still burned with rage. Elias introduced them one by one, voices heavy with loss. Ruth Callahan, apron still tied, revolver at her hip. "I lost 2 sons in that camp," she said, steady. "Tell me when, Sheriff. I'll be there." Samuel nodded. Clara listened. When silence fell, she stepped forward, shoulders squared under Samuel's coat. "And I'll be there too." The room went still. Samuel's head snapped toward her. "No, you've been through enough." But her voice didn't waver. "I know their faces, their habits, their blind spots. You can storm that camp with rifles blazing, but without me you'll walk into a trap. I won't hide while others fight my war." Samuel wanted to argue, to shield her from the fire waiting ahead, but when he looked into her eyes he saw something unbreakable, something forged in torment but hardened into steel. He gave a slow nod. Elias clapped his hand on the table. Then it settled. "We ride for Devil's Hollow tomorrow night." They rode at moonrise, 8 shadows slipping through the pines, hooves muffled against the earth, breath misting in the cold night air. Samuel rode at the front, Clara Mae behind him, her arms wrapped tight around his waist. She didn't tremble. Her face was set toward Devil's Hollow like a compass, fixed on the one place she swore never to return. The land shifted as they drew closer. Trees thinned, the soil darkened, black as coal. Smoke carried on the wind, thick with ash and iron. Devil's Hollow yawned ahead, a scar in the earth lit by fires that never seemed to die. Cabins squatted at the rim, men moving between them like ants in the glow of forges. A watchtower leaned at the north edge, a lantern swinging against the dark. Elias raised his hand, signaling halt. The riders dismounted, leading their horses into brush. From here on, it would be feet and grit. Samuel's boots crunched against the gravel as he scanned the ridges. His jaw was set, eyes hard. Clara stepped beside him, pointing toward the lantern glow. Her voice was a whisper, steady despite the pounding of her heart. That tower burns low. They'll be half asleep. The river cut runs beneath. 2 guards, no more. One favors his left leg, the other... She hesitated, the memory catching like barbed wire. The other likes to carve his initials. Samuel's hand brushed her shoulder, not comfort, but acknowledgement. She had turned her pain into a map, and tonight that map would lead them through hell. They slipped into the river cut, the current cold against their boots, water tugging like ghost hands. Moonlight painted silver scars across the surface. Each man moved careful, weapons held high, breath measured. Only Clara whispered, guiding them with the precision of someone who had lived every corner of this place. 2 guards waited at the bend, one swaying with a bottle in hand, the other dragging his knife slow across a rock. They never saw it coming. Samuel's shotgun barked once, thunder in the gorge, and the drunk dropped into the river. Ruth Callahan's revolver cracked sharp, neat as a seamstress's stitch, and the other crumpled with a hole through his skull. The current swallowed them both, bodies vanishing into dark. The group pressed forward. The camp spread wide above them now, forges roaring, men laughing crude songs, flames licking the night sky. The stench of sweat and cheap whiskey rolled down the hollow like a curse. Elias crouched low, eyes sweeping. We split. Jonah, Ruth, and I take the west side. Cut their supply wagons, set fire, draw their men. Sam, you and Clara head straight for Harlan's quarters, end it at the head. Samuel's hand tightened on the shotgun. Clara's knife glinted faint under moonlight. They shared a look, brief, sharp, unspoken. Then Samuel gave a nod. Ruth lit a torch with flint, flame leaping high. She hurled it into the nearest wagon. Dry wood caught fast, fire roaring skyward. Shouts split the night as half-dressed men stumbled from cabins, rifles raised, confusion thick. Elias's rifle cracked from the shadows, Jonah's pickaxe swung, Ruth's revolver spat fire. Chaos bloomed, sudden and wild. Samuel and Clara slipped through it like shadows. She led him between cabins, past tethered mules braying at the smoke, past a drunk guard, too slow to notice until Samuel's fist laid him flat. Clara's breath came quick but steady, her body moving with a determination born of scars. At last they reached the largest cabin. Its windows glowed with lamplight. 2 guards stood at the door, rifles loose in their hands. Samuel didn't hesitate. One blast from the shotgun dropped the first. The second barely had time to draw before Clara's knife buried itself deep in his throat. She yanked it free, wiping the blade on his vest without flinching. Samuel pushed the door. Inside, the cabin stank of tobacco and arrogance. Silas Harlan sat at a heavy desk, boots propped high, bourbon glass balanced in his hand. His hair was slicked back, his vest embroidered like a king of dirt, his eyes gray and cold, fixed on Clara the moment she entered. Well, well, his voice slithered across the room. My little runaway, and the old war dog who thinks he can play hero. Samuel raised the shotgun. His voice was gravel. It ends tonight, Harlan. Harlan chuckled low. You think a badge or a broken girl changes anything? I own this hollow. I own every man here. Kill me, and another steps in. That's the West, old man. Men like me don't die. We multiply. Clara stepped forward, knife flashing. Her voice cut sharper than steel. You're wrong. Men like you rot. And tonight it starts. Harlan flipped the desk, revolver flashing from underneath. The shot cracked, grazing Samuel's arm. Pain flared hot, but Samuel fired back, blasting the revolver clean from Harlan's grip. Splinters flew. The lamp toppled, flames licking the floorboards. They closed fast, fists replacing steel. Harlan was younger, heavier, arrogance fueling every strike. Samuel met him with years of soldier's grit, every punch carrying the weight of silence and regret. They stumbled across the room, chairs splintering, bottles shattering, the fire spreading higher. Harlan slammed Samuel against the wall, forearm crushing his throat. His breath was rancid bourbon. You'll die here, old man. And she'll crawl back to me. That's what broken things do. Clara moved before the words finished. Her knife drove deep into Harlan's side, the blade sliding between ribs. His eyes went wide, shock breaking his sneer. He staggered, blood blooming across his vest. Samuel wrenched free, seized Harlan by the collar, and hurled him to the floor. The tyrant gasped, clutching the wound, crimson spreading fast. Clara stood over him, knife steady, her voice calm as stone. You carved your name into me. Now the earth carves its name into you. Harlan's lips moved, but only a wet gurgle escaped. His body shuddered, then stilled. The fire crackled, greedy, beginning to swallow the room. Outside, the battle raged. Elias's rifle cracked steady, Ruth's revolver sang. Jonah swung his pickaxe like vengeance itself. Harlan's men, seeing their leader fall, faltered. Some fled into the hills. Others dropped weapons, begging mercy. Cabins burned, wagons toppled. The hollow lit up like Judgment Day. Elias burst through the door, badge glinting in firelight, rifle still smoking. He saw Harlan sprawled in blood, Clara standing tall, Samuel steady, but bleeding. Elias let out a long breath. Well, damn, he muttered. Guess you didn't need me for the final act. Samuel wiped blood from his brow. We needed you to make it stick. Law's the only thing that makes this more than revenge. Elias nodded. He stepped outside and raised his voice, sharp as thunder. Silas Harlan is dead. This camp is finished. Lay down arms or answer to the badge. The men froze. Some tossed rifles to the dirt. Others scattered into the dark, swallowed by wilderness. By dawn, Devil's Hollow was nothing but smoldering ruins. The fires died to ash. The forges went cold. Survivors stumbled free from shacks, blinking at the rising sun as though seeing daylight for the first time. Clara moved among them, Samuel's coat hanging loose on her shoulders, her voice steady as she offered water, comfort, direction. She wasn't the broken woman who had collapsed at Samuel's boots. She was fire now, forged from scars. Samuel watched, the ache in his arm forgotten, something heavier stirring inside. Elias came to stand beside him, gaze sweeping the wreckage. She's tougher than either of us, Sam. Samuel nodded slow. She saved me as much as I saved her. The sheriff clapped his shoulder hard and sure. You always did need someone to drag you back to the living. By morning the hollow was a graveyard. Smoke curled from blackened timbers, ash drifting like snow through the air. What had once been a kingdom of cruelty was reduced to charred ruins and silence. The survivors moved like ghosts through the wreckage. Men and women who had known nothing but lash and fire stumbled free from their shacks, eyes squinting against the dawn. Some wept, clutching each other. Others simply stared, too hollow to cry, as though freedom itself was a language they'd forgotten. Clara Mae walked among them, steady, shoulders squared beneath Samuel's coat. She carried a bucket of water from the river, pressing tin cups into trembling hands. Her voice was quiet but firm, guiding them like a shepherd calling scattered sheep, No one asked her who she was. They saw the scars on her back, and they understood. Samuel stood at the edge of it all, watching. His shotgun rested against his leg, but his eyes weren't on the survivors, or even on the ruins. They were on Clara, on the way she bent to lift a child from the dirt, on the way she straightened a wounded man's bandage with fingers that had once trembled, but now moved with purpose. For the first time in 13 years, Samuel Mercer felt the past loosening its grip. Not gone, never gone, but lighter, as if the weight of Tennessee and the girl in the fire had shifted, shared. Elias Vance came to stand beside him, rifle slung across his back, badge glinting in the new sun. His face was lined, tired, but his eyes carried the same sharpness Samuel remembered from younger days. "You did good, Sam," Elias said. Samuel shook his head. "She did good. I just kept my promise not to walk away again." The sheriff studied him, a faint smile tugging at his beard. "Same stubborn bastard you always were." They stood together in silence, the kind men share when words are too small. The ruins smoldered, the sun climbed higher, and the survivors began to drift down the ridge in search of towns, families, or just open land that wasn't claimed by a tyrant. By noon, only a few riders remained, Ruth Callahan, Jonah Pike, and a pair of ranch hands who had followed Elias. They gathered what they could from the wreck, rifles, tools, even sacks of flour left unburned. Ruth spat into the ash and muttered, "Not enough to balance the scales, but it'll do." Then she mounted her horse, gave Samuel a nod, and rode west without looking back. Jonah lingered longer. His twisted hand clenched the reins, his eyes locked on the burned cabin that had once been Harlan's quarters. "My brother died in that hell," he said. "I thought killing the devil would ease it. Don't." Samuel met his gaze. "It never does." Jonah grunted, a sound more bitter than agreement, and rode east into the dust. By late afternoon, only Samuel, Clara, and Elias remained at the hollow. The fires were cold now. The silence wasn't peace, but aftermath, heavy as the hush after thunder. Clara stood at the rim, staring into the scarred earth. Samuel joined her, boots crunching on cinders. She didn't turn. "Do you think men like him ever really end?" she asked. Samuel's eyes followed the horizon, where dust shimmered in the heat. His voice was low, rough. "No, but every time someone stands, men like him lose ground." Her lips curved, faint but real, a smile not of joy, but of defiance. She turned to him, eyes steady. "Then I'll keep standing." He studied her, the torn linen still clinging beneath his coat, the braids she'd woven into her hair, the scars that no longer bent her shoulders but carried them upright. He thought of the woman who had collapsed at his boots, whispering, "Please, don't." And he knew she was not the same. Nor was he. Elias approached, reins in hand, his horse stamping impatient in the ash. "I'll ride back to Santa Fe. File the report. Spread the word Harlan's finished. Law will hold what we built here." He glanced at Samuel, then at Clara. "What about you two?" Samuel looked to Clara. The choice wasn't his alone anymore. She met his gaze, calm, certain. "I don't want to hide again. Not in a cabin, not in a camp. If you ride, I'll ride." Samuel felt something stir in his chest, not the weight of regret, but the pull of the horizon. He gave a slow nod. Elias mounted his horse, tipping his hat. "Then I'll see you on the trail." "And Sam," his voice softened, carrying years between them, "don't disappear this time." Samuel gave the smallest of smiles. "No promises." The sheriff rode off, his figure shrinking against the horizon until the dust swallowed him. Samuel and Clara turned back to the cabin that had been Harlan's throne. Its walls sagged, its roof blackened, but a pair of horses stood tethered beside it, restless but alive. Samuel untied them, led one toward Clara. She hesitated only a moment before swinging into the saddle. Her hands gripped the reins with certainty, not fear. Samuel mounted beside her, the leather creaking under his weight. They sat there a long while, the ruins behind them, the open land ahead. The sun bled toward evening, painting the sky in streaks of fire and gold. The wind carried ash one way and the scent of pine the other. Finally Clara spoke, voice soft but strong. "You think folks will remember this? That the hollow burned?" Samuel adjusted his hat, eyes fixed on the horizon. Out here, stories don't end. They just keep riding, one ridge to the next, one fire to another, and if folks remember, it won't be the fire, it'll be the ones who stood against it. Clara's smile returned, faint but certain. She nudged her horse forward. Samuel followed side by side, their shadows stretching long across the dying light. Behind them, Devil's Hollow smoldered. Ahead of them, the west stretched endless. And somewhere between past and horizon, Samuel Mercer felt the first stirrings of life he hadn't known in 13 years.
Samuel and Clara Mae rode toward the horizon, leaving Devil's Hollow in ashes behind them. Two broken souls found redemption in courage and justice. Subscribe to Western Stories and Tales for more frontier legends. Which tale should we tell next? Until the next trail.